Hey, yeah, thanks for having me on.
It's good to have you on. Tell us about the newest gem in Geno Crandall that is transferred from North Dakota to Gonzaga as a grad transfer. What does he add to the program?
Well, he answers the only real question that people had about Gonzaga entering this season, which was, where's their depth at point guard? This is a guy who put up big numbers at North Dakota. He played in the kennel last year and almost single-handedly upset Gonzaga. His Twitter profile picture is him getting a shot up over Josh Perkins. He scored 28 points in that game. He looks like a guy who will be a perfect backup point guard, but he could also start alongside Josh Perkins. He can take care of the ball, do ball handling duties, but he can also get his. And the one thing Gonzaga needed was somebody else. Losing Silas Melson, they need somebody else besides Josh Perkins who could bring the ball up the floor, distribute, and run the offense. And they got a guy who can do that, and a guy who can shoot too. So he's a perfect fit for what Gonzaga needed.
Look, this happens every year. They get these guys coming. Like, does Mark Few even need to make a pitch to anybody, or do they just line up outside his office waiting to see if he'll choose them?
I don't think Mark Few really did need to make a pitch to Crandall because Crandall had already seen Gonzaga firsthand. But you're right, Gonzaga does every year. They get people the level they're at now. They can recruit with the highest teams in the country, but players who want to take one last shot, grad transfers, stuff like that, Gonzaga is a perfect landing spot for these guys. So it works out well for both of them.
I argued in the opening segment that Gonzaga being good is good for BYU. I don't believe BYU is really competing for first. They're competing for second. And if BYU beats Gonzaga, then it would mean more. What's the viewpoint for the rest of the league from your opinion of Gonzaga continuing to load up and makes 4 straight Sweet 16s and got to the Final Four? How does that affect everyone else in the league?
But it's got to be great for everybody else in the league. I'm sure it doesn't feel great most of the time for these other teams because most of the time they do lose when they play Gonzaga. But if you're being honest, when you look at the West Coast Conference, the storyline every season since 1999 has been Gonzaga. When Gonzaga hasn't been as good, it's still been Gonzaga. BYU's first year in the league, Gonzaga didn't win the title. And the storyline wasn't so much BYU's in the league or St. Mary's is good and won the title. It was, oh, wow, look, Gonzaga's run of consecutive league championships has come to an end. And so in years when Gonzaga is really good, like the Kelly Olynyk year or like 2 years ago with Nigel Williams-Goss and the team that made, 29 wins in a row until you guys came to town, the more eyeballs are on every game. I'm a big Gonzaga fan. I'll watch every game, but I can't lie and say at points last year I wasn't super excited for the second time Gonzaga is going to beat Pepperdine or whoever by 30. But this year, if Gonzaga does make it to conference play undefeated or with just one loss and they're in the top 5, every game matters more, even when it is against a team floating around that 200 RPI level. Every game matters more. Maybe some of these national writers will decide to take a nap during like an afternoon A-10 game so they can stay up late to watch Pepperdine for the first time in the season. You know, the better the Zags are, the more eyeballs are on the league, the more interest is in the league, the smarter people get about the league, and that benefits every team in the league. And a team like BYU, which has a shot to make the NCAA tournament, benefits from that as well because Gonzaga's better. Gonzaga's going to have a higher RPI. The Cougars are going to look better. And even playing close with Gonzaga, if they don't win, more people are going to respect that.
Even though this year's NBA draft was just a few weeks, we're just a few weeks removed from it, obviously there's still projections for next year's NBA draft. NBADraft.net has both Hachimura and Tilly slated as first-round picks. I mean, and Hachimura could be in the NBA this year if he wanted to. Decided to come back. It's going to be a top 10 pick. It's going to be a lottery pick next year. And he may be coming off the bench. How concerned were they that he was going to leave, and what is the potential for him this year?
You're right. He could be coming off the bench, and I wouldn't be too surprised to see that. You've seen Gonzaga send 2 lottery picks to the NBA in recent seasons. Zach Collins came off the bench, And if Shamik Karnowski hadn't gotten hurt 5 games into the season a few years ago, Domantas Sabonis probably would have been coming off the bench for the whole season. So it's nothing new for Gonzaga to send big men to the lottery from the bench. But to your question, I don't think the staff was particularly concerned. Everything I've heard from them, and every time I've talked to Rui, he seems like a young man who knows where he's at, knows where he wants to get, and understands the process that will take him to the level he wants to be at. So I'm fairly certain that the staff knew he was going to come back. He knows he's not quite there yet. They know he's not quite there yet, and he wants to get there. And his potential this year is, I mean, he came off the bench last year and was absolutely dominant. I think if he comes off the bench again this year, which is quite likely considering how loaded Gonzaga is again, they're going to have to bench someone who would be a starter on almost any team in the country. But whoever they bring off the bench, and if it is Rui Hachimura, when that player comes off the bench, they run the offense through him. So you're giving up a start, but you're still getting just as much playing time, just as many opportunities, and it won't hurt the team or the individual because they all seem to trust in the system and understand that starter or reserve, you have just as good of a shot to get paid next season.
And it's not about starting, it's about finishing, let's be honest. We're talking to Will Maupin from Mid-Major Madness, covering Gonzaga for the Inlander. Bigger impact transfer. Geno Crandall, grad transfer, he can play right away. Or Brandon Clark, the San Jose State transfer who redshirted last year.
I think it's Brandon Clark. Geno Crandall is the topic du jour right now, deservedly so. But Brandon Clark is the numbers he put up at San Jose State and the situation he is in are eerily similar to Jonathan Williams. Transferred from Missouri, sat out a year. Perfect player for Gonzaga for 2 seasons. Very similar to Brandon Clark. I expect him to be a starter, which is part of the reason why I think Rui might be coming off the bench again. He's big, he's strong, he can score, he can rebound. And Gonzaga has found great success with Jonathan Williams, and they have another guy who is a very similar player that they can just slot right into that spot and keep on rolling. With Crandall, though, it's more of a depth piece, whereas Clark could be a focus of the offense in a way that Crandall certainly won't be on a game-by-game basis.
There's some changes within the conference that have been announced over the last couple of months. It affects scheduling in terms of non-conference and within formats, things like that, all of them pro Gonzaga. With that in mind, are the Zags happy right now? Are they content? Or do you think because of where the program is, they will always have a wandering eye?
I think they'll always have a wandering eye, but I also think and hope that they are content in the West Coast Conference. Late this season during March, during the tournament, there was a lot of talk and speculation and a very real possibility that Gonzaga would leave for the Mountain West, which in my opinion is a lateral move, not a move up in any way. I hope that those talks weren't particularly serious, but just the threat of that potential outcome was enough to force the conference to make some changes to appease Gonzaga. And like you said, they made some scheduling changes. Aesthetically, I'm not a fan of having a 10-team league that doesn't play a true double round robin, but they do benefit Gonzaga, and they benefit BYU as well, giving these teams that are of a high caliber more opportunities to schedule good teams out of league play. But I think Gonzaga, just knowing that it is the best thing in the West Coast Conference and is a little bit held back by the West Coast Conference, you can't fault the Zags for courting suitors in a way that forces the hand of the league to benefit Gonzaga.
Hey, business is about leverage, man. It's not about pleasing everybody. Yeah.
Exactly.
Mark Few joined Greg Popovich's staff for Team USA the summer mini camp that announced this morning. What are the odds Few jumps to the NBA at some point in the future?
I think they're incredibly slim. I just found out about this today, obviously, and
that's not the answer I wanted.
I know, yeah. I'm sure BYU fans would love to see him leave, but he's never left for a better job at the college level. And I don't know, maybe if Seattle were to get an NBA team, or if the Blazers, gave him a very lucrative offer. If he could land somewhere with good fly fishing and stay in the Northwest, maybe. But he seems very content at Gonzaga. And, I mean, he's got this team almost consensus preseason top 5 right now. No, they don't look like they're ever going to slip up. I mean, you know, you get a bigger paycheck in the NBA maybe, but he's right where he wants to be right now.
Yeah, exactly. Will, we appreciate the time. Great insight joining us here on Gonzaga Sports BYU Sports Nation.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It's always good, middle of the summer, to get some college hoops in.
Absolutely. That's Will Maupin on the Deseret First Credit Union Hotline. Deseret First, your values, your timeline, your financial future.